Hi everybody. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do some really basic animation skills using the inbuilt camera function inside 3ds Max. It's particularly useful for, say, if you wanted to, if you've created a scene inside Max and you wanted to animate or have someone move around your scene to create like a small little animation that leads to that might look something like this, where a camera's moving around, it's moving around your scene, it's looking at things, particularly useful if you're trying to simulate a particular environment that someone may walk around. In top view it might look something like this, where the camera follows a certain path and it looks at certain objects as it's following that path. So it's a really useful tool if you want to be able to simulate a future environment in your scene, and it's actually quite quick and easy to do. So without further ado, let's get started. I might just clear away this old scene just so that you can watch me go from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to stay inside my perspective window, and I'm just going to create a few new boxes just to simulate a few cities. So I might just say create a few boxes around here. I might zoom out. It's a bit too small. Might just create a few small, a few taller ones out here. Yeah, I think that's enough boxes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have a camera just circulate the perimeter of this scene, sort of like a aerial flyover around the perimeter. So basically, the first thing we need to do is we need to just quickly draw out a path in which we want the camera to follow. So I might just switch into a 4-view mode, which might be a bit easier. So probably the easiest way to do this is to just just go to the create box, go to a shape, and just create a circle. And just create a circle roughly around the perimeter of the shape. So you can see in perspective view, we've got a perimeter of a circle, and this is the path that the camera is going to basically follow as it watches, or I guess circulates our buildings. Now, what I might do is I might just move up this circle. I might move it up a little bit just so that when the camera is following the path, it doesn't sit at the ground. It actually is, in the air, so that it's actually looking down at the scene. So I might just maybe put it about that high. So now that we've sort of got our scene ready to go, now it's time to put in the actual camera itself. So if you go to the create option here, and if you go to cameras, the one that we want to create in this instance is a target camera, because we want our camera to be focusing its target on this scene over here. So if we click and create target, if you just click and hold and let go, basically it'll the original camera position will be where you originally started it, and this little box here is the target in which the camera is focusing on. So that way, as the camera circulates around around the circle, it'll always have its eye on the center of the circle here. I'll just get rid of this very quickly. So basically, now that you've drawn your camera, we need to attach the camera to the actual path that we wanted to follow. So it's actually not attached to the path right now. So if you actually try and click play, I might just switch one of these into the camera view. So you can firstly see that right now, that firstly the camera is sitting at the surface level, so you can see the base of the buildings. But if you actually click play, nothing's going to happen because we haven't asked the camera to do anything. So basically, what we'll need to do is we'll need to select the camera. Select the camera, and then we need to go into motion, just this fourth one along here on the right hand side, and we need to modify the assign controllers, because the assign controller is what dictates how this camera moves. Now, the one in particular, we want to change the position controller. So right now its position is X, Y, Z. And what this means is that the camera is just simply locked onto a fixed XYZ position in your scene. But as I said, we want it to follow this circle. So what you need to do is highlight the position controller, go to the Assign New Controller button up here, and click on Path Constraint, because we want the movement of the camera to be constrained to a path that we've drawn, namely the circle. So click on Path Constraint and click on OK. Then scroll down in the new command prompts and click on Add Path. And this is where we get to assign the new path to the camera. So click on Add Path and then click on the circle. Now, as you can see now, the camera actually attaches itself to the circle, and you can see that the camera view, if I get that away, the camera view actually now sits slightly up and it looks down on the scene. So now if I click play, you can see how the camera now just hovers around the perimeter and encircles the actual scene itself. So if I was to do that again in top view, click play, you can begin to see that the camera moves around the circle. So, it almost could potentially simulate, someone flying around in a helicopter, looking down at the buildings. Now, another camera path that we often like to include is, what if someone was actually walking in between these buildings, almost like a street pedestrian, in other words, not flying from a bird's eye view. And we can also simulate that path as well. So deleting that camera and also deleting this old path, we're going to firstly draw a new path in which we want the camera to follow, and we're then going to create another camera to attach to that path. So let's just first create a new path. So I'm just going to go to the create, and I'm going to create a new line. And I want this to be a smooth and curved line, not a linear straight line, because we don't walk that linearly as humans. So I'm going to create a line, I'll make a corner, and I'll make it a bezier. So what that will allow me to do is, as I click and start a new line, and then I click and finish a new line, I can bend my path accordingly. Bend it accordingly, just so that I've got a bit of interest in terms of how my path is actually moving, and then I'll right click to finish the path. So my path's a bit weird, but at least we've got a nice curved path in which our camera can now follow. Again, what I might do is I'm going to select this path, and I'm just going to move it up, just so that when the camera's starting, it doesn't start looking at the ground like it did last time. So I might just move that a bit further up. So now that we've gotten our path, now it's time to put the camera in. So going back to the create option on the right hand side here, back to cameras. This time we're going to create a free camera, not a target camera, but a free camera, which allows the camera to, as you probably guessed, move in a free manner rather than focusing on one target. So we'll click on free, and I want my camera to start just here. Now it's important to note that the camera does start off in a really wonky direction, like it looks down. I just click zoom extend. So it actually looks down. So you're gonna have to just rotate this camera so that this is probably a better view. So you probably need to rotate this so that it faces, so that the camera actually faces up, so you're not looking down at the ground. So, oops, that was an accident. So we'll select and rotate this, and we'll rotate this up. We'll keep rotating it up. How's that? Oh, that's still a bit dodgy, I think. If I look into the perspective view, yeah, it's actually on its side. So I might just rotate it 90 degrees so that it stands upright. And yeah, I think that's and then what I might just do is I might rotate it so that it's it starts off looking at the scene just like that. So you can see now where the camera's still a bit wonky, so I might just fix that. So there, now it's standing upright roughly at 90 degrees, where previously it was facing down at the ground. So now that we've fixed up our camera position, it's time to constrain the movement of this camera to the curvy path that we've just drawn. So selecting this camera, going to motion on this right hand side here, and again we want to change the assign controller. Particularly we want to change the position because we don't want it to be constrained to the current position. We want it to be constrained to the path that we've drawn here. So we'll click position, and we'll click assign controller, and we'll click path constraint, and we'll click OK. And again, if scrolling down, this gives us a new option to add a new path or a new parameter in which to constrain the camera to. So I'm going to click add path, and I'm going to click the line that we drew just before, and boom. And you can see now in perspective view that the camera is now sitting and is constrained to this path. So I'm just going to change this. I might just use this view as the perspective in the meantime. And I'm going to change this one to the camera view. And then I'm going to click play. So you can see it's gone a bit wonky, but at least, we're actually moving through the buildings. And we can actually look at our scene from at the ground. So in terms of how it would move, how it's actually moving, at the top, you can see that it is generally following this path here. But the odd thing you can see here is that the actual lens of the camera isn't actually moving. So it's almost as if someone is just, holding the camera in a fixed position and just moving along the path here. What we want to do is we want this camera to move, the camera lens to move or rotate as it moves along the path, just so that it's sort of like a human head where we turn our heads as we walk along the path. And how we can actually do that is we select the camera, and then we go down to the path options here at the bottom and click follow. And what this will then do is, now if I do it on the top view, it's in this view here, if I click play, you can see that as the path moves, the camera moves along with it. So you can see how it sort of just it's a bit more natural in terms of how it moves in terms of the overall lens. So how this would now look if we were to switch it back to the camera view, in other words, looking at how the camera would look at this, you can see that it's a bit more realistic, sort of, in the sense that we're sort of moving our heads in a fairly erratic, in a fairly erratic motion. But at least we're still turning our heads, as opposed to the camera being in a fixed position. Now you can make your scene a bit longer if you'd like, by going to time configuration, just on the side here. Click time configuration, and you change that number up to 200. It gives it a bit more frames, and what that will do is that will allow your camera to move just a bit more smoothly through the actual scene itself. And that's pretty much it in terms of how you can create an animation in a fairly quick manner. You know, especially if you need to just, you know, make a really quick simulation of your city, without having to get too crazy in terms of having to export this out into a video and a movie and so forth. Thanks everyone.